In the midst of recent scandals, failed policies, corruption, cover-ups, both at the federal level and here in the state of Oregon, how do we trust these pesky politicians and these bold bureaucrats when they tell us something? Welcome to People, Places, and Politics. I'm Patty Milne, and my special guest today is Jim Pasero. And Jim, with his varied background and fantastic experience, is the perfect person to help us wander through who do we trust, how do we know when we're getting accurate information. And just real briefly, let me share with you some of Jim's background. Has lots of knowledge and experience at the federal level on economics and health care back in the 80s and the 90s, and you're certainly not old enough to have been doing things then. And Jim was a speechwriter for the Republican National Committee during the 1992 presidential campaign. You are well known as a publisher and a part owner of the popular, I thought it was popular, I had a subscription to Brainstorm Northwest magazine back in the late 80s, 90s.
The magazine went 12 years.
12 years, okay.
Years. Then apparently the industry died.
Yeah,
we went the way of Newsweek and Gourmet and Travel and Leisure Golf and tons of magazines that have gone on.
And I hate to see that because, and this is what we'll be talking about today, is where do you get accurate information, kind of specialty information, and from not only publishers, writers, and people who are producing these information pieces, but you can trust what you read. And now it's so much harder. But we'll talk more about that. But also you have, as you mentioned, you were a correspondent for Travel and Leisure Golf magazine, frequent radio guest and panelist on Comcast Trailblazer post-game show, Talkin' Ball. And then, of course, you're an University of Oregon grad and have a graduate degree from Johns Hopkins University. So, Jim, how do we know? Where do we go to get accurate information with all these, like I say, scandals, cover-ups, corruption?
Well, you know, it's a great question, and in fact, it's such a good question. I don't have an easy answer to it. I got the question about a month ago from my pastor at St. Patrick Catholic Church in Northwest Portland, which is the oldest Catholic church in Portland. We just have our 125th annivery. But our priest is Father Lucas Labarde. He's from Argentina, and they have a society up here, and they part of what they do is work with young people to to get them back to the Catholic Church.
Can I interrupt? I'm sorry. I don't know that your mic's coming in.
Oh dear.
I thought you were good, but now that I'm hearing you talk, I think you're just picking up on Patty's. I might have to switch your mic.
Okay.
Okay. See how easy it is? We can stop and start again.
Well, and it'll be right. Just start right where she asked you that question of how did you know.
Okay.
Who do we trust? How do we know?
Who do we, oh, I know what I did.
Uh-oh, you're not.
No, you're totally good. This was plugged in from last time. Someone did 2 and 3 instead of 1 and 2. I'm just being a dummy. I'll get you fixed if you want to run that kind of on the inside of your jacket. Yeah. Sorry. I have it ready, and I'll get. It's weird, but I'll give you a countdown.
We did the Blazer show in a bar for the first year, and there were so many things.
So I'll go 3, 2, 1, and you just take it away, okay?
Okay. Very. Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I thought too, if you wanted to talk about the video,
Beyond the Agreement.
Yes,
Sure.
I made a note to myself on that, and then these also.
Okay, we'll begin in 3, 2, 1.
Well, that's a great question, Patty, because, and I don't know if I have a quick answer. A lot of people are asking that right now, and at my parish, at my Catholic parish at St. Patrick in Northwest Portland, my priest, Father Lucas Labarde, is from Argentina, and they're a group of priests from Argentina that are working in Corvallis and in Portland, and their mission is to get young people reinvigorated back to the Catholic Church. And of course, that's a whole different mission. But he asked me, because he's extremely intelligent, and they're very curious, and they said, well, where do we go for unbiased news source in America? We really want to follow the news, but where can we find unbiased news sources? And I was stunned. But I was stumped by the question, and I didn't have a really good answer for him. And then I asked some friends of mine, and they said, well, I asked my friends, and they were Democrats, and they said the New York Times. And I asked my
Oh,
Republican
my.
friends, and they said the Wall Street Journal. I said, no, this is exactly the problem
That's
that
the
these
problem.
priests are running into. There's no place they can go, feel like they can get a sense of what's really going on in America without that media, that axe to grind. And we see it with issues like immigration. We see it, in our party with climate change. I don't think that I would be somebody who would want to stop the economy for to control climate change. But I know when I read things from our side, it's not, it's really hard to get anybody who's just looking at the issue objectively.
Well, that's the problem, is the objectivity and the facts, the real facts,
Right.
not the manipulated facts or somebody's own personal perspective.
Right,
So,
and we saw it in the Iran. We've seen it in the Iran treaty. I mean, the Wall Street Journal just every day for a month about how horrible the treaty was, and yet in their news section they had 2 or 3 stories saying it was okay. And I thought, well, can't somebody just? Can't we step back a little bit and not be so emotional about every issue and just look at and judge them, or try to? Be analytical about it, but it's right now it's very difficult.
So when you were the publisher, the
Brainstorm Northwest Magazine,
Brainstorm,
right?
And
we
now
went 12 years.
Yeah, and now also with this newsletter, Oregon Transformation: Ideas for Growth and Change.
Right.
How do you decide who is writing for you, or who do you ask to submit information? Is that a gauge of the direction, the objectivity?
Well, and thanks for mentioning the newsletter, because we just started it 2 or 3 months ago. We've gotten a great response. We have an audience of a couple thousand people.
It's wonderful. You can see I have it all marked up. There's such good information.
It's a little
in it.
monthly magazine online. It took me, after the magazine went out of business in 2009, which was well received, the magazine, and I know you were a subscriber, but it was $50,000 a month to do a regional magazine, and the industry died. And so I had to pout for 3 or 4 years to figure out what, my business partner, Bridget Barton, she didn't pout as much as I did, but it took me a while to want to, I was sort of stumped again by the idea of print media declining and people, the internet and the questions that you raise. I mean, they're just all so complicated. I didn't know what to do. And finally, this year we decided we were going to take a newsletter and basically deliver the magazine once a month online to people. And there are some costs, but it's incredible. I mean, you know who your audience is, and you can tell by how many people open it and how the intensity of it, and so and we were being really successful with it right now.
Good.
And it costs 10% of what a magazine. People don't want their information hard copy anymore these days. I don't know why.
I don't know. I still like to have that. You see, I even printed this so I can write on it.
I feel
you can't write on a newsletter on the computer like you can write on it here, and I can bring it, and we're discussing it today. But I'm just old-fashioned. So you've moved to modern times,
right,
and your
your
technology has
Thank
improved.
You. And how do we pick
how do you decide whose information to print?
I think this is really a question about the state of Oregon. I mean, we are in a massive leadership crisis. And
Definitely.
we have a governor who is, to me, she is part and parcel, or whatever pablum I want to say out of my mouth, of the public employee unions. I mean, you could just put her in and put some, she just, you might as well just put the anonymous head of the public employee union as governor of Oregon. And now we've had this bad ruling on the PERS by the Supreme Court. And we know all of a sudden we're 800 million more that we need in the biennium that we thought we did.
But shouldn't the question have been originally, why are we pursuing this when you know that the judges were going to look at that contract?
I suppose.
I know that's maybe another topic for another time.
I suppose, I suppose, yeah. I mean, I can't get past the fact there are certain things that we just know about the public employees. We know that teachers can retire at 55. Mm-hmm. We know that the benefits, the percentage of the school budgets
over 20% of the budget goes to benefits in Oregon, and it's under, in Washington State, it's under 10%. So they're not committing economic suicide at the same rate that we're committing it. We know we have the shortest school year in the country. We know we're last 49th in graduation rates. We'd be 50th if Idaho kept track, but they don't keep track. We know we're 40th in student achievement, and apparently from the recounts I read about that if when they adjust how they're really doing it now, we're not 40th.
Worse.
It's worse. So you know this issue better than I. But these are just the facts. And yet we look at the legislature, and the Republicans have been spending the entire legislature saying to people, we need to give more money to the schools. And why are the Democrats being so stingy about not giving more money to schools?
They don't really need more.
The money,
they're getting more money.
Well, not only that, but it's just like the Republicans are being, what are they, left to the Democrats? There's no accountability in this thing. I think in so many ways, Oregon is being represented by the most mediocre people. And the reason, and that gets back to my answer to this is, I don't think it's that hard to identify who some of the smart people are. But unfortunately, they're not in charge of this state right now. We have picked the most mediocre people to be our leaders, and that's why our situation right now is really a bad crisis. And it's a slow crisis. You know, the frog boiling to death for 15 or 20 years. It's not a 9/11 crisis where boom, you turn on and go, we're really in crisis. But when you look around the state and you go on vacation and other places and you in the rural and you stop in and you see the people that are in the towns and the condition that the towns are in, and even in the metro area, which they say is so great. The average, Equal Northwest did a study, the average income, a family income, is down $4,400 in the last 5 years. And this is the place that's doing so great.
Which is to one of the points, one of the questions I raise is, so we hear this, we read it in the paper, the legislators are being fed this pablum of things are better, things are better, we're back to where we used to be.
Because unemployment's falling.
And yet, but that's not the whole truth. So they get away with just telling you a little bit.
Story.
And I love Ben Franklin. Half a truth, half a lie. Half a truth is the same as a whole lie. So if these decision makers are not looking themselves for accurate information, if they are just taking what's given to them, and the information is not 100% accurate, they only get the pieces of information that unions, the heavy-duty lobbyists want to feed to them.
An agenda.
So how do we insist on, how do we make sure that the decision makers, legislators and other elected officials, are actually doing some homework on their own? I mean, they're not making decisions that affect everybody's life based on all the information that's actually available, which goes then back to, where do we go to get the real, the accurate information? And who do we trust?
And it's like, and you were talking about it, and I took a long time to answer, but how do we pick people to write? We look for people that have something to say and have a real critical eye. I mean, that's one of the things that we really are missing in the state is identifying the people that are really sharp, who don't have necessarily axe to grind, and who can really zero in on a problem. And I'll give you an example. Phil Keisling, who was the Democratic Secretary of State.
In one of these.
Yeah,
the more recent, I think.
I sat down with him. He's doing work at Portland State about the cost of compensation for public employees.
It's a very good article. Very good.
And it turns out, the work that he's uncovered around the state, in county government, and local government, state government, is the cost for a compensation for a public employee in many, many fields is 100% of their salary. And in the nonprofit world and in the private sector world, it's 30% of someone's salary is sort of the norm. And so Phil, I saw him 2 weeks ago for breakfast, and he gave the most brilliant half-an-hour lecture extemporaneously on how the public employee unions cook the negotiations with the school boards, so that the school boards don't have a fighting chance when they're trying to talk about budgets and control costs. And Phil's a Democrat, and we should be. I mean, if I was governor, I'd say that guy's in charge. You know, I mean, and there are other people in our newsletter. Phil Romero was the chief economist for the state of California when Governor Wilson for 8 years. He came up here and was for 5 years was the dean of the U of O Business School, and he's a tenured professor. at U of O, but
his article was very good as well.
Yeah, and what he talks about in his article is the history that people have of basically, as we call the happy talk. The economists here, the state economist, other economists, they're paid to say nice things about the Oregon economy. So when the unemployment rates go down, and which the unemployment has fallen, everybody gets all excited. The economy, in fact, the state economist said that the economy is as hot as it was during the housing bubble here. And well, that's when you look at incomes and what's happened, it's just not true. We are creating jobs, but over 50% of them
lower paying. They're not at the level they were before the economic downturn.
And 50% of the jobs that we are creating are $15 an hour or less. The average family income's down $4,000 to $5,000 per family. The middle class, according to Pew in Oregon, has shrunk from 51% to 46%. All of the trends in terms of incomes are really not good. And the businesses, there are 2,000 people who are homeless, who are living on the east side of the river in Portland. There are 2,000 people homeless who are living in the woods in Bend. Now, they're not all because of the economies. There's addiction issues and mental issues, but the trends in this state, I mean, when you drive around and you look at the condition of the small towns, say in Lincoln City and other places, it's the casino that looks nice and the rest of the place looks like shanty. And we have to have a path forward. And we have the most mediocre people in leadership. We've had one party for 20 years, and they have done the kind of job running the state that you could expect when you're never criticized anymore.
Well, and what disturbs me is then people just give up. They go, I don't want to be bothered. Why do I want to even be aware of the fact that life is not so good these days? Why do I even want to read in the newspaper how crummy the economy is? Or why do I care? My voice doesn't count, my vote doesn't count, and I'm still beating that drum, vote, vote, vote. And of course, May 19th, there's an election, and lots of money issues, bonds, school boards are looking for money for building and whatnot. Fire districts need new fire engines.
If we give the schools more money, we won't be last in graduation rates.
Yeah. But a neighbor of mine stopped me just the other day to ask, what about this? And just in my area, we have, countywide, there is to form a new district for extension services. The school district is wanting a bond for renovations and updating security. The fire department needs some new equipment. And, all of a sudden, it's a lot of money, additional taxes. And people say, I'm voting no on everything. I can't afford it. Which goes back to this point of wages have not increased. Too many people are out of work. If they are working, they're working at a lower level or maybe 2 part-time jobs. Yes, there's some at the upper end who are doing okay. But I know, too, from my last political campaign and knocking on doors around this area, right here in Salem, and I was just so astounded at the horrible living conditions, as you mentioned earlier.
It's happening right before our eyes.
It is, and a lot of it is, we can talk about education, we can talk about other things, but this idea that, and it's largely the Democrats who are, as you mentioned, in control for so long, and they tell the people, I feel your pain, I'm going to take care of you, and all they really do is turn around and stab them in the back.
Well,
with increased fees and it was increased taxes. And
when you go 20 years without business people in office, and business people, 10 years ago, Republicans weren't winning elections in Oregon 10 years ago, but business people were at least running. Business people are not even running anymore. They're not even considering it. And one of the things, you talked about the disconnect that's going on, Oregon is one of the leading states in terms of percentage of GDP that it exports and that it does in manufacturing, and this is due to Intel and the chip industry. And Washington County, because it's home to Intel and home to Nike, has 10,000 people living in the county or near the county making $200,000 a year, and they're in the global economy, and it's
they're
kind
disconnected from what's right under their nose.
right, and it's kind of a game. They love living here and fishing and doing and enjoying the outdoors and all of those things, but the actual investment that they have in the civic affairs of this state is not great. Their companies globally doing so well, and so there's that top level, and then you and I know a number of business leaders who have retired and moved out of the state or spending more and more time out of the state, and they're disconnecting. So you have the global people that are disconnecting, the successful business people that are disconnecting from the politics, and as generations change, what's coming up underneath it to really provide some leadership for Oregon to be to get out of this mess and return to some kind of economy that functions better.
Well, I know I keep telling my children and my children's friends, and now even my grandchildren, it's up to you. It's up to the younger generations.
And how do they respond to
and, well, I will tell you, I have one child who left Oregon to move to Washington State.
Where the average resident makes $7,000 more per capita than the Oregon resident.
And they love it up there, having grown up. He and his wife, having grown up here in Oregon, started some businesses, have had some success here, but said we've got to get out of here if we want to be more successful, and if we want to enjoy more of our life and sharing and doing things with people. I have another child who is thinking about leaving the area, and the third one has a business here, so won't be going anywhere. But that's so.
What kind of business?
Financial.
Yeah.
But I hear it all the time, and we know it's true too from recent college graduates. Our in-state college graduates are leaving.
Right.
We know that statistically. We know they're not staying because you can open a business in Oregon once you make your way through all the regulatory things and you have some money that you can actually start the business, but businesses don't expand in Oregon because when you get to various levels, it's too costly. And now this minimum wage discussion, other employees,
the carbon tax.
People are going, I can't afford to expand my business. I'm going to remain a mom and pop, and that's it.
I think one of the things that's really frustrating about the Oregon political situation too is that I think that the average Oregonian, the average Oregon voter is probably a pretty moderate Democratic business person. And that would be Ted Wheeler, that would be Phil Kiesling, that would be my friend Brad Witt, who's in the legislature, my old college roommate, who's just been crucified by the liberals because he's for good union jobs, and he tried to help prevent. They were going to ban spraying the forest, and so in these situations, the people in charge, the public employee unions and the hard left environmentalists and the governor, they don't represent business Democrats. And on our side, on the Republican side, we have way too many Republicans who sit around and watch Fox News and watch Wall Street Journal, and they talk national. I consulted with many Republican candidates in the last cycle. None of them connected well. None of them won, which, okay, we've been losing for 20 years. So, but none of them connected well to Oregon. Where was their vision for Oregon? How people are going to live here in Oregon, and how we as a community come together to solve problems such as teachers being allowed to retire at 55 and Mike Bellotti getting a pension at $55,000. I mean, there are just there's some things that we have to do, trust together as, my father was a sports columnist here for 50 years, and he had a big reputation. And one of the things he always taught me was, he said, we are in a small state, and if we don't work together in this small state, we are going to drown. And that is how it feels right now. That there is nobody on the political scene that has enough of a megaphone that is talking to the people of the state, and they're not listening either, about how we come together and move this state forward. Because this state, by any indicator, is sliding and pretty rapidly behind, especially its neighbors on the west.
Definitely, and just our neighbors to the north, up there in Washington.
And California too. California's 14th in per capita income in the country, and we're 33rd. We were 22nd 20 years ago, and John Kitzhaber came in and he said, I'm going to protect the fish, and I'm going to protect the rivers, and I'm not going to protect the people. and in the South Coast, the fish are doing a lot better than the people.
Yes.
It's
so sad down there.
Well, yeah. Be a fish, not a person down there.
So in the last few minutes that we have, Jim, can we go back a little bit to, so what do you see for the future? How do we get, and you're working on it, getting good, solid information to your readers, and getting people to talk more about what the reality is, which reminds me, talk a little bit about your video that you did, the myth.
Well, we made a half-an-hour documentary last fall, and we made it because we wanted the state to change, and we were hoping that Dennis Richardson would get elected governor, or at least what we were really hoping was that John Kitzhaber wouldn't get a fourth term. And he didn't get a fourth term, but it didn't turn out quite the way we wanted. The power structure hasn't changed in Oregon at all. And
nor have the politics.
Right. And
in fact, more to the left.
More to the left, yes. And so the question is, so we made the movie, and we went to Coos Bay and talked about the LNG plant. That's an $8 billion investment that may or may not happen because environmentalists don't want jobs in Coos Bay, and how depressed 30% of the people living in poverty there. And we went up to the wind farms that are subsidized in Sherman County and Hood River. We went to Tillamook, or to Yamhill County, and the wineries and the land use laws, and looked at the fact that these people who have bed and breakfast, and nobody knows this. If you have a winery, you can only have a bed and breakfast. You can't serve lunch or dinner. You can't have more than 9 rooms in your inn, and so the people have to get they have to get drunk at the winery, and they can't stay at these. And some of the places like the Black Walnut Inn are just spectacular. And so we made an episode on traffic. We made, I think there were 6 or 7 episodes that went into this 30-minute film. You can get it.
Is it still available?
Yes, you just on the internet, just Beyond the Oregon Myth, and it'll Google that and it'll come up, Beyond the Oregon Myth. You can also get the newsletter at Jim at third, spelled out, thirdcenturysolutions.com, Jim at thirdcenturysolutions.com. Anybody who emails me, I'll send them the newsletter. But we estimate of the movie, which came out 2 weeks before the election, we think 100,000 people saw it. But one of the reasons 100,000 people saw it is we bought time right before the Trailblazer Golden State Warrior game and made people watch it before the pregame show. But we did social media. I mean, these days there's not one media source that you can use to get a large audience. I mean, even KGW or the Salem, you've got to go. You've got to have earned media. You've got to have free media. You have to have social media. You have to do all sorts of, and you have to use all the grassroots organizations. And we did that. We reached out to Oregon Food and Shelter, and we reached out to Oregonians in Action, and all sorts of people to help promote the video. And so it was successful that way, but the election still went 5 points in the wrong direction.
Unfortunately.
And this year, in 2016, because I think one of the things that's happening is I think people realize the one-party state is really killing Oregon.
It is.
And people don't want to be Republican here, but they don't want one-party state. And so I feel like if we can just, as Republicans, there were 6 statewide elections on the ballot in 2016, if we can go 1 for 5, wouldn't that be something? Just to win one statewide election and begin to change things a little, and begin to establish a critical eye in the conversation.
Well, like I say, we need to get facts. We need to get good information to people so they can make better informed decisions. And we're going to run out of time here in just a second. So say one more time how people can view the video and get your newsletter, and then we'll have to wrap up.
Beyond the Oregon Myth. So just Google that. And to get the newsletter, Jim at thirdcenturysolutions.com.
All right, very good. Well, thank you so much for being my guest, and I love your information, and you're going to have to come back. We didn't really actually get to some of the harder things that I wanted to, so so we'll have to come back and revisit some of these again.
Well, I'm usually doing the interviewing, so it's a pleasure to be able to blab, go running off of the mouth.
Well, you have so much good information to share, so I'm so glad you could be here, and we'll come back again.
Thank you.
So thanks so much for being with me. And thanks for watching People, Places, and Politics.